You know, it turns out that a really big percentage of our customers are first-time amplified players. So a question we get a lot is, what do I need to buy for my first rig? And today we're going to talk about exactly that. So when I say rig, what exactly does that mean? A rig is sort of like slang for everything that you bring to the gig. So it's going to be your instrument, your bow, your wireless system if you have one, cables, if you've got any pedals, if you have an amp, a DI, a preamp, any of that stuff that you're going to bring to the gig that you're going to plug into, that's your rig. So what do I need to buy? If I'm the first time amplified violinist, what do I need to buy? What do I need? At a minimum, you need an instrument and a bow. You need a way to amplify that instrument, and then you need a way to attach that instrument to whatever you're using to amplify it. So if we start at the beginning of that, and we're talking about the instrument side of things, what do I need to get? Well, there's a couple of options. One of the things you can do is just get a pickup for the acoustic violin you've already got. The other option is to get a whole new instrument, one of these guys back here. So if I'm going to get a new instrument, what kind of things do I want to consider? I'm going to need to look at my budget. And when I'm looking at my entire budget, I've got to leave room for a bow, for an amp, for effects. When you buy an acoustic violin, they generally tell you about 70% of your budget is going to be the instrument and about 30% is going to be the bow. We kind of have some similar percentages here, but it really depends a lot on what type of venues you're playing, how much money you need to set aside for amps and effects and all that kind of thing. You want to consider how many strings you want. I know when you buy an acoustic violin, generally that's not one of the things you have to think about, like it's a 4-string violin, right? Electrics, 5-string violins are at least as common as 4-string violins, and we even sell 6s and 7s. You need to think about what type of sound you want. Do you want sort of a darker, warmer, richer, fatter sound? Do you want a thinner, brighter, clearer sound that's going to cut? What type of sound do you want? And then, of course, the look is important. Do you want something that looks like an acoustic violin? Do you want something that looks radically different from an acoustic violin? Do you want something with lights? Do you want something that has a bunch of colors? Do you want something that sort of looks very skeletal? There's a lot of options, right? So those are all things to consider. It turns out that you're already on our YouTube channel right now, but I'm going to put up a link right here to this playlist that you can see here, where we've got a bunch of review videos for instruments. And we've got them in different price categories, under $1,000, between $1,000 and $2,000, and all that kind of thing. So you can check out those review videos, and you'll be able to see and hear each of the different instruments that we carry, and kind of help you make a decision on which ones you think might sort of be what you need. If you have questions after watching those videos, please feel free to hit us up, and we would love to talk to you about, hey, what's the difference between a cantini and a bridge, and which one might work better for me. The next question, we mentioned a bow. Do I need a special bow? Unless you have a 6 or 7 string violin, you probably don't need a special bow. A regular violin bow will play a 4 or 5 string violin just fine, but you might want another bow. I like to own as many bows as I have instruments, and that way I just pair them up. Because if I'm practicing one of my instruments at home and I put that instrument and that bow back in the case, and I grab a different instrument to go play somewhere, and I show up and I've got an instrument, but I realize that my bow is in my other case, it's going to be a really bad day. So I like to make sure that I've got my instruments and my bows paired up. Not because I need a special bow, but just from a practical standpoint of making sure that if I have an instrument, I also have a bow. So here we come to this way to amplify thing. We need to have a way to amplify the instrument. And there are a number of options here that are probably going to differ based on what it is that you're doing with your instrument. There's 2 questions you need to ask yourself. How is your audience going to hear you? And how are you going to hear you? With an acoustic instrument, you're like, well, I play it. It's under my ear. I can hear it. And if I play loud enough, the people out in front of me are going to hear it. With amplified instruments, it isn't necessarily that easy. First of all, your stage could be loud enough. In my situation, I've got drummer splashing away next to me. No violin's going to be loud enough for me and the audience to hear. And it could be that you're in a venue that's loud enough or large enough that your regular acoustic violin wouldn't be able to be heard anyway. The other thing to keep in mind is that electric violins really don't make a whole lot of sound. You're probably not going to be able to hear it just under your ear if your stage has any volume at all. So you need to think about how your audience is going to hear you and how are you going to hear you. So some people plug into an amplifier. They bring an amplifier with them. They plug the violin into the amplifier, and that amplifier is loud enough that they can hear it on stage. And sometimes in a small or a quiet enough venue, that amplifier is going to be loud enough for the audience to hear as well. Another option would be that you plug into what they call a PA, or a public address system, which is going to be the speakers that everybody else in the band is plugged into. If you've got a drummer and a bass player and a singer and a guitar player, they're all probably going to be maybe have an amp on stage for them to hear, but then they're plugging into the PA that the audience is going to be able to hear. Now, plugging into the PA, we use 1/4-inch cables inside our rig, from the instrument to the pedals to the amp. To connect to a PA, you need XLR cables, and I'll show you what those look like. This is what a 1/4-inch cable looks like. It can also be called a guitar cable or an instrument cable. Those are all interchangeable terms. And you're going to need 1/4-inch cables to connect your instrument to your pedals to your amp, okay? But then when we want to connect to the PA, we need what's called an XLR cable or a mic cable, and that looks like this. Generally, there's going to be something in your rig called a DI that you're going to plug your 1/4-inch cable into, and then an XLR cable is going to come out. And sometimes they look like this. Sometimes it's a different shape or color or whatever. But generally, there's going to be a box somewhere in your rig that is a DI. So it converts 1/4-inch signal to an XLR signal that they can now plug into the PA system. Just a little bit of terminology for you there. They don't cover any of this stuff in classical music school. So back to ways to amplify. If you're using an amp or PA, even if you're plugging into the PA through the DI box and all that so that the people out front can hear you, you still need to be able to hear yourself. Remember, the crowd has to hear you and you have to hear you. So there's kind of 3 options there. One is that you're going to have an amplifier that you bring with you that's going to sit on stage and it's going to point at your head and you'll be able to hear yourself. Another is if they have monitors. There'll be speakers that are on the stage that will have your instrument in there and then whatever else you need to hear. And then in-ear monitors. That's also a thing that people will use where they put little buds in their ears, and then you've got an amplifier pack on your belt. So you kind of figure out, when I'm putting my rig together, what is the situation? Am I going to use just an amplifier? Am I going to use monitors? Am I going to use in-ears? And these are all things that we can help you as you're piecing your rig together. We can help you talk through what is it that I need to buy. If I'm going to buy an amplifier, which amp is best? Oh my goodness, there are so many options and there are so many factors to consider. We've got a video that I'm going to put up a link to here that if you need to pick an amplifier for your violin, that video is going to help you do that. Now, I've got to figure out, we said we need an instrument and a bow, we need a way to amplify it, and then we need a way to attach the instrument to the thing that's going to amplify it, right? So most of the time you're going to use cables. There's going to be cables inside your rig if you have multiple pieces of your rig. But how am I going to attach my violin to that rig? I can use a wire, a cable or a wire. Cables are cheap. You're looking at, $15 or $20 maybe for a cable. They're reliable. When you plug them in, they pretty much work. But there's also a thing called a wireless system, so I don't have to have a cable that's tethering me to the ground. And wireless systems are super convenient. I really love a wireless system. In fact, we just did a video on that last week. I'm going to put up a link to that here. If you'd like to be wireless, there's some information there for you. Now, do I need effects? Do I need to run distortion or flangers or phasers or delays or reverbs? No, you do not need effects. You can just take your violin and run straight into an amplifier or a DI. Now, most of the time, an electric violin is going to sound a lot better with at least some effects, especially if we consider reverb or EQ to be effects. Most amps are going to have reverb and EQ in them. So you can just plug your violin into the amp, use the effects that are built into the amp. You can just plug your violin straight into a DI box like I showed you, and then have that go to the PA. And sometimes your front of house engineer, the person who's mixing, can add some reverb or some EQ for you. That can all be handled without you buying any extra stuff. If you would like to have a little more control over your reverb or your delay, or a volume pedal is really nice sometimes, or if you want to start exploring other sounds, wah pedals or distortion or synth sounds, whatever that is, then you're probably going to want a board that is going to process that sound for you. And there's two different ways to go. You can buy individual stomp boxes, or you can buy a multi-effects pedal. And again, there's a video. I'm going to put up a link if you need to know more about that. The next thing, or sort of the last thing I want to talk about, you may hear a lot of people will talk, oh, if you got an electric violin, you definitely need a preamp. Do you need a preamp? The answer to that is maybe. It depends. It depends very much on what you're plugging into and what type of instrument you have. So if you're not sure if you're going to need a preamp or not, there's a video here, and I think that's going to help you figure out all that. So when we say a rig, what is my very first rig that I need? Instrument and a bow, a way to hear yourself, a way for the audience to hear you, and then a way to connect all those things together. Maybe you need a preamp, maybe you need some effects. I hope that this kind of maybe demystified that for you a little bit and made you aware of some of the choices that you're going to have to make. Believe me, we can help you with all that. So if you have questions, feel free to contact us. Our email is info@electricviolinshop.com. You can hit us on the socials. You can ask questions in the comments here on YouTube. All those things are totally fair game. Would love it if you'd subscribe to our channel, check out some other videos we've got, and we will see you next time.